Thanksgiving dinner, my cousin Talia stood up in front of everyone, raised her glass, and smiled like she had just won an award. "We voted," she said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "And Selena, you're no longer family." For a second, I thought she was joking. I even laughed nervously, waiting for the punchline. But then my entire table, cousins, aunts, even Uncle Craig, burst into real laughter. Someone shouted, "Group selfie!" And chairs scraped back as they rushed together, arms slung around each other, grinning for the camera. They held up their phones proudly, tilting them to make sure I wasn't in the frame. I stood there, still holding my plate, the half-eaten slice of pumpkin pie wobbling slightly as my hands shook. No one looked at me. No one even cared that I was still standing right there. I set my plate down quietly and started to walk toward the door, heart hammering so hard I could barely hear anything except the blood rushing through my ears. I told myself it was fine, that it didn't matter, but it did. It mattered more than anything. I was almost at the door when a deep, steady voice cut through the laughter. "Selena, sit down." I froze. It was Grandpa, Henry Marlowe, the oldest, wisest man in the family, and the one person I never ever expected to step into the middle of this. Every conversation in the room stopped. Every head turned. Grandpa pushed himself up from his chair, grabbed the karaoke mic they had been using earlier for family games, and stared at the room like he was seeing them clearly for the first time. What he said next silenced every single person in the house, and it changed my life forever. Thanksgiving had always been a strange holiday for me. Growing up, it was supposed to be about family, about feeling at home. But every year, walking into Uncle Craig's lake house felt less like a homecoming and more like stepping onto a stage where I never knew my lines. The house was packed that day, every room buzzing with noise. The smell of roasted turkey, cinnamon sweet yams, and baked apples clung to the air. Kids screamed in the basement. The adults laughed too loudly over beers and wine, and every single person seemed to belong in a way I never quite managed to. I stood by the door for a minute, balancing a store-bought pumpkin pie in my hands, wishing I had brought something better. Everyone else had come armed with heirloom dishes and secret family recipes. I had picked up the pie at a grocery store on the way over, after debating for an hour whether I should even show up. Uncle Craig was the first to spot me. He strode over with a wide grin and clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Hey, Selena." "Look at you, city girl. Glad you made it," he said, his voice too loud, his eyes already darting away to someone else. It was the kind of greeting you gave to an acquaintance, not family. Talia floated in behind him, wearing a sleek cream sweater dress, her blonde hair curled into perfect beach waves. She barely looked at me before turning to hug another cousin. Behind her, my other relatives filled the house, laughing in small, tight groups. No one noticed when I quietly placed my pie among the homemade dishes. No one asked how I had been. No one made room at their table. I found a seat at the kids' table, even though I was 27, because there was nowhere else to sit. I tucked myself into a corner, stirring my sweet tea with a plastic straw, trying to pretend it didn't bother me. The truth was, I had never fit in. After my parents died when I was 15, I moved around foster homes until I aged out. Uncle Craig and the rest of the family lived their lives like nothing had changed. I saw them on holidays if I showed up, but no one called, no one checked in. I learned early that my presence was optional. Still, some small part of me clung to the hope that this year would be different, that maybe, with everyone a little older, they might see me. Really see me. Grandpa Henry was the only reason I still came. Sitting near the fireplace, dressed neatly in a cardigan and slacks, he looked older than I remembered, his hands thinner, the lines around his eyes deeper. But his presence still carried weight. He didn't say much these days, but when he did, people listened. Growing up, he had been the one person who never treated me like an outsider. When I was little, he would slip me extra marshmallows in my cocoa or sneak me books from his personal library. After my parents' funeral, when everyone else avoided me like grief was contagious, Grandpa had sat me down and said, "You are not broken. You are not less. You are ours." That memory stuck with me through every lonely holiday and silent birthday. So when the first round of family awards started after dinner and Talia took the mic, I tried to laugh along. They handed out silly prizes for loudest laugh, most likely to spill wine, Best TikTok dancer. It seemed harmless at first, but then the jokes shifted. Sharper. Crueler. And for the cousin who disappears for months without calling anyone. Selena Marlowe. Laughter. And the award for most mysterious life, because nobody knows what she even does for work. Also Selena. More laughter. I felt the heat rising in my face. I forced a smile, nodded, acted like it was all funny. The truth was they didn't know anything about me because they never asked. I had a job. I had a life. I paid my own bills, made my own way. But none of it mattered in a family that valued performance over presence. I glanced toward Grandpa. He sat quietly, his face unreadable. Told myself to stay calm, to stay polite. It was just a joke. That was how they would spin it. It was always just a joke. But deep down, something inside me began to crack. And I knew, even before the final award was announced, that this Thanksgiving would not end like all the others. It would end differently, and it would be a day I would never forget. I stayed seated, forcing a smile as Talia and the others carried on with their family awards. It was obvious now that the real point of the game was not celebration, it was humiliation. And finally, Talia said, holding up the glittery microphone with a dramatic flair, we have the ultimate honor, this year's Family MVP. But before we announce the winner, we have a little update to share. The room quieted down slightly, people leaning forward in their chairs with half-interested grins. Even the kids at the smaller table paused, sensing something was about to happen. Talia grinned and turned toward me. We took a vote, she said brightly. And Selena, you're no longer family. There was a second of stunned silence, just long enough for me to wonder if maybe I had misheard her. But the laughter that exploded a heartbeat later made it clear that I had heard every word exactly right. Phones came out immediately. Talia grabbed her cousin Jess by the arm, pulling her into a selfie, making sure to frame me out of the background. Uncle Craig threw an arm around another cousin, laughing loudly, shouting, "Freedom!" Someone clinked their glass with a fork, calling for a toast, and others whooped and cheered. They all played along, pretending it was the joke of the year. I stayed frozen in my chair for a few seconds, the noise around me blurring into a harsh, metallic roar in my ears. My chest tightened so hard it hurt to breathe. My hands trembled in my lap, but I willed myself not to show it. Get up. Walk out. Do not give them the satisfaction. I pushed my chair back quietly and stood, smoothing down my sweater with shaking hands. I could feel the heat of 100 eyes grazing me, even if no one was brave enough to look me straight in the face. I left the pie behind, half-eaten and forgotten, and started toward the door. My boots tapped lightly against the hardwood floor, the sound sharp against the dull roar of voices behind me. Each step felt heavier than the last. I told myself it did not matter. I told myself they had never truly been my family anyway. I told myself I was used to this. But none of those things were true. It mattered more than I wanted to admit. Because somewhere deep inside, even after everything, I had still hoped for something better. I had still believed there might be a place for me at that table. By the time I reached the front door, my hands were shaking so badly I had trouble pulling my coat from the rack. I blinked hard against the sting building behind my eyes, furious at myself for caring so much, furious that they could still make me feel small with nothing more than a few cruel words. I grabbed my coat, shoved one arm through a sleeve, and reached for the doorknob. That was when I heard it. Selena. Sit down. The voice was sharp, commanding, and utterly unexpected. I froze, my hand still hovering over the doorknob. For a moment, I thought I had imagined it, that my brain was playing tricks on me out of desperation. But when I turned around, there was no mistaking who had spoken. Grandpa Henry had risen from his chair by the fireplace. His hands gripped the edge of the table to steady himself. He was not smiling. He was not laughing. He looked at Talia, then at Uncle Craig, then slowly swept his eyes across the entire room. The entire house fell silent. The laughter died like someone had cut a wire. Even the children froze, sensing that whatever had been funny a moment ago was no longer funny at all. Uncle Craig tried to break the tension with a forced chuckle. "Dad, it was just a joke. Come on, lighten up, it's Thanksgiving." Grandpa did not so much as blink. He reached over and grabbed the karaoke microphone out of Talia's startled hand. His fingers shook slightly, but his voice was steady when he spoke again. "Enough!" The word cracked across the room like a whip. I stood frozen by the door, coat half on, heart hammering against my ribs. For a split second, I wanted to run. I wanted to escape before the humiliation could get any worse. But something in Grandpa's eyes rooted me to the spot. He was not about to humiliate me. He was about to say something that none of us would ever forget. I stood still by the door, coat clutched in my hands, staring at Grandpa Henry. Every eye in the room was locked on him too, though no one dared say a word. Grandpa did not rush. He adjusted the microphone with a slow, deliberate movement and waited until he had the full weight of the room's attention. Even the smallest sounds, someone shifting in their chair, a fork sliding against a plate, seemed too loud against the thick silence that had swallowed the house. He looked older than I remembered, but there was no mistaking the steel behind his posture. His back was straight, his chin lifted, his hands steady now that they had something important to hold on to. "You think what you did was funny?" he said, voice sharp and clear. "You think mocking family makes you clever?" Talia opened her mouth to respond, but Grandpa raised a single hand, palm out. She closed it just as quickly. He turned slightly toward me. "Selena, you put that coat down. You are not leaving." I swallowed hard. My first instinct was still to run. I did not want to stay, not after the way they had humiliated me. But something deeper, something anchored in every moment Grandpa had ever made me feel seen and loved, made me lower my arms. I draped the coat over a nearby chair and stayed where I was, back straight, heart pounding in my chest. Grandpa shifted his gaze back to the family. His voice grew stronger. "All of you sit down," he said. Chairs scraped against the floor as people obeyed. Even Uncle Craig muttered under his breath and dropped into a chair near the kitchen counter. Once the room was still again, Grandpa spoke. "You voted her out of this family," he said slowly. "You laughed. You treated her like a joke. But let me tell you the truth, and you better listen closely." His eyes swept the room, daring anyone to interrupt. "You are not her judges. You are not her gatekeepers. Because if we are talking about real family, about blood, about where this family comes from, then there is only one person in this room who carries the true Marlowe blood." He pointed at me. "Selena." The shock hit the room like a physical blow. A low murmur ran through the tables. A few aunts exchanged confused glances. Talia's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Uncle Craig leaned forward, his forehead creased. "Dad, what are you talking about?" Grandpa's eyes narrowed. "You think you know everything, Craig? You think keeping secrets makes them disappear?" He took a breath, steady and slow. "When you were a baby, we adopted you. Your mother and I loved you like our own because you were ours in every way that mattered. But the truth is, you do not carry the Marlowe bloodline. We never told anyone because it did not matter to us. You were ours. You are still ours." The room spun around me. I gripped the back of the chair in front of me to stay upright. Grandpa kept going. "Selena's father, my son Nathaniel, was my only biological child. He passed that bloodline on to her. She is the last true Marlowe by blood sitting in this house." Dead silence. I looked around the room. The people who had laughed at me minutes earlier now stared at their plates, their drinks, the floor, anywhere but at me. Talia stood stiffly beside her chair, her face pale. For once, she had nothing to say. I could feel a shift under my feet, like the whole foundation of this family had cracked open and exposed something rotten underneath. Grandpa turned back to me and softened. "You belong, Selena," he said. "More than any of them have the right to claim." The strength in his voice made my chest tighten painfully. For the first time in a very long time, I was not the outsider. I was not the afterthought. I was the heir to something real. Grandpa walked slowly toward me, ignoring the stunned faces around him. When he reached me, he put a hand on my shoulder. "You stay," he said quietly. "This is your family, too. Never let them make you doubt that." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. I took my seat again, back straight, head high. Not because they wanted me there, Not because I needed their permission, but because I belonged, and nothing they could do would ever take that away again. The silence that followed Grandpa's words wrapped itself around the room like a thick fog. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the children, sensing the weight of something enormous and irreversible, sat quietly at their little table. I sat at the far end of the dining room, staring at the cracked ceramic plate in front of me, the remains of my half-eaten pie drying into a sticky crust. I barely breathed, waiting for someone to say something, anything, to break the tension that pressed down on all of us. Talia was the first to move. She dropped her fork onto her plate with a loud clatter and stood up, arms folded tightly across her chest. Her voice shook when she spoke. "That's not fair. That's not even real. You're making this up just to defend her." Grandpa turned his head slowly toward her. His face was calm, almost weary. "You think I would stand here at my age, lying to protect her feelings? I have never lied to this family," he said, voice firm. "You can ask your father, ask your aunts. They all knew there were things we kept private because it did not matter who shared our blood. We loved each other anyway." He turned to Uncle Craig, who looked down at the table, shame written across his face. "It never mattered to me until today," Grandpa said, shaking his head, "until I saw all of you gang up on a young woman who has done nothing but show up, year after year, hoping for kindness." Talia flushed bright red. She opened her mouth to argue again, but found nothing to say. Grandpa pointed at her, and then to the rest of them, his voice rising just enough to rattle the silverware. "You all think family is about being loud, about being popular, about laughing the hardest and showing off the most, but family's about loyalty. It is about standing by someone when it is not easy. It is about showing up, again and again, even when you have every reason to walk away." He took a slow breath and let it out hard. "You failed that test tonight. Selena did not." The finality of it left no room for argument. Slowly, the realization settled over the room. Every smug grin, every whispered joke, every sidelong glance they had thrown at me over the years, they could no longer be hidden behind claims of humor or tradition. The ugly truth stood in the center of the dining room for everyone to see. Grandpa turned back to me. His eyes softened, the hard edges of his anger giving way to something warmer, something that still carried all the love he had always shown me when no one else bothered. "You are not just part of this family," he said. "You are its heart." I blinked fast, willing the tears back, determined not to fall apart in front of them. Not here. Not now. Slowly, Grandpa reached out and took my hand, giving it a squeeze that sent a rush of warmth up my arm. His hand was dry and papery, but strong. A few relatives shifted awkwardly in their chairs. Aunt Marcy dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. Uncle Craig rubbed the back of his neck, shame turning his face blotchy and red. But none of them said a word. Talia sat down heavily, pushing her plate away as if the food itself had turned sour in her mouth. It was over. Not in a loud, dramatic explosion, but in a slow, crushing realization that changed the landscape of our family forever. I sat taller in my chair, no longer shrinking into the background, no longer hoping someone would notice me. I met every gaze that dared look in my direction and held it steady. Let them see me. Let them finally understand what they had thrown away. Grandpa leaned closer and whispered just loud enough for me to hear. "You deserved better long before today." My throat tightened so hard I could not answer, so I squeezed his hand in return. In that moment, I understood something I had missed for years. I had spent so much time trying to earn their approval, trying to prove my worth when I had never needed to. I had always been enough. Their cruelty did not define my place at the table. My blood, my history, my heart did. And now, thanks to Grandpa, so did my truth. The family dinner limped along after that, quieter, more awkward. People murmured half-hearted apologies under their breath. Talia avoided my eyes completely. Uncle Craig tried to joke about old family memories, but the warmth was gone, and it never came back. The damage had been done, and the truth had been spoken out loud. And sometimes, truth was all you needed to set yourself free. After dinner ended, people moved around the house in stiff, uneasy clumps. The usual chaos of Thanksgiving cleanup was gone. The once lively conversations about football games, sales, and family gossip had vanished, replaced by murmured excuses and long silences. I helped clear a few plates from the table without being asked. No one stopped me. No one offered to help. I was a ghost walking among the living, but this time, I was not the one who should have felt ashamed. In the kitchen, I stacked plates and scrubbed them under the lukewarm tap water, scrubbing harder than necessary just to give my hands something to do. Behind me, I heard soft footsteps and turned to see Grandpa standing there, leaning lightly on his cane. "You don't have to clean up their mess," he said gently. I smiled, a small, real smile, and wiped my hands on a towel. "I know," I said. "I just needed a minute." He nodded like he understood exactly what I meant. Then he shuffled over, pulling a chair closer to the counter so he could sit while I worked. "I meant every word," he said after a pause. "I would say it again tomorrow if I had to." I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in years I realized he was not just defending me. He was handing me the permission I had been waiting for my whole life. Permission to stop chasing people who did not deserve me. Permission to stop explaining myself. Permission to be proud of the person I had become. "Thank you," I said, my voice rough. He smiled, the kind of smile that sank into his whole face, warming every crease and line. "You have always been more family than the lot of them combined," he said. "You stayed kind. You stayed strong. That matters more than blood, but it turns out you had both." I set the last plate down and sat next to him, letting the silence settle between us. It was a good silence, one filled with understanding instead of judgment. After a while, Uncle Craig wandered into the kitchen, his hands shoved deep in his jeans pockets, face flushed with embarrassment. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then finally said, "Selena, I am sorry. We should not have... It was stupid." I nodded once. I did not need his apology. I was not carrying the weight of his mistakes anymore. "I know," I said simply. He shifted awkwardly, then turned and left without waiting for forgiveness. Grandpa chuckled under his breath. "You handled that better than I would have," he said. I smiled again, this time without bitterness. The truth was, I had already forgiven them long before tonight. Not because they deserved it, because I refused to carry their cruelty with me anymore. I had spent too much of my life trying to earn a love that was never mine to earn. I was done. As the night wound down, I helped Grandpa into his coat and walked him to the car. The stars were out, scattered across the black sky, and the cold bit into my skin as we made our way to the driveway. Before getting into the passenger seat, Grandpa paused and turned toward me. "You are going to be just fine," he said. "Better than fine." I hugged him tightly, feeling the frailty of his frame against mine, and whispered, "I love you." "I love you too, kiddo," he said, patting my back. When I finally got into my own car and started the engine, I sat there for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, watching my breath fog up the windshield. For the first time in years, I did not feel the aching, gnawing loneliness that used to cling to me after every family gathering. I felt light. I felt strong. I realized that belonging had never been something they could give or take away. It had been inside me all along, waiting for me to claim it. As I drove away from the lake house, I thought about what Grandpa said. Family is not about who laughs at you when you fall. It is about who sits beside you when you cannot stand. It is about who reminds you that you have always been enough. That night, I stopped waiting for a seat at someone else's table. I started building my own, and I promised myself that whoever sat at it would never have to wonder if they were wanted. They would know, just like I finally did. If this story touched you, if you have ever felt like the outsider at your own family table, I hope you know now, you are not alone. You deserve to be loved. You deserve to be chosen, not just tolerated. If you connected with this story, please give this video a like. It really helps more people find it who might need to hear these words today. Share it with someone you care about. You never know who might need the reminder that they are enough just as they are. Leave a comment below and tell me. Have you ever experienced a moment where you realized you did not have to keep fighting for people who would not fight for you? I would love to hear your stories. And if you want more true stories about resilience, healing, and finding your voice, make sure you subscribe to the channel. New videos are coming every week, and I would love for you to be part of this community. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for being here. You matter. Never forget it.